Okay, here we go. I'm Cree. While I'm talking and introducing myself, first I am a writing teacher. I'm a writing instructor by trade, so we're going to do some writing. I am packing and moving offices, so normally I'd have this big bag of pens. I don't know where they are. I can't find them. So if you have a pen or you can borrow one from your neighbor, what I would like you to do on your card that you've got is think about yourself come November-ish, maybe before or right after Thanksgiving break. That tends to be a really stressful time for instructors. And write what you think you would need to hear at that time. So something down. Hey, Cree, I know it's almost Thanksgiving. I'm sorry you have to go to your in-laws' house, but please know the semester is almost over. They'll be happy that you went, and it's good for your children to have a positive relationship with their other grandmother. It will be fine. Also, you're an awesome teacher. You're amazing. Bravo. Okay? That's what I would probably write to myself. So as I'm introducing myself, if you're capable, if you're able to do that, I don't just write it. What is it? Yourself, November-ish. What are some motivating words that you think that you would like to hear? After you write the note, you put it in the envelope, and then to save me some money, could you put your university mail, so your name and your UMAC numbers on there, and then come somewhere around that time, this envelope will just kind of plop into your university mailbox, and you can open it and receive some words of encouragement. So that's the goal. So you can write those down while I talk about myself for a minute, and then we'll get to the content of the of the session. So my name's Cree Taylor. I am a senior lecturer in the English department. Senior lecturer just means that I was promoted from lecturer to senior lecturer. There's a slight pay bump, but there are no other perks besides that. I am a mother, first and foremost. If you read my bio, that's how I foreground everything. I have 5 children, ages 10, 7. He turned 7 today. It's his birthday today. 10, 7, 5, 3, and then I have a 4-month-old. She was born in April, and she was 4 months old yesterday. And I love them very, very much. My husband's a physical therapist in Brigham City. I have to show people what they look like, so I'm not the annoying person on my phone being like, look how cute my kid is. But like, I made them, and they're cute. I'm very proud of them. So we got to show you what they look like. For this presentation, I'm going to do everything I can to make it as hands-on and workshop-y as possible. And for some of you that know me or have heard me present before, I talk way too much. So this is a goal that I've set for myself to like build in intentional time for you all to actually consider some of these ideas. I think the hardest part about professional development, which is essentially what the ETE conference is we get it right now, and some of us are teaching connections a week from now, and then we're teaching in like a week and a half. And that idea was great. I love it. But, I mean, I have my plan already. I don't have time to implement everything I've learned. And for me, I'm like, man, I wish professional development happened in April. So then I could plan it and do better. So today I want to just try to give you an opportunity to sneak little nuggets into your curriculum. So our workshop agenda, we might not get through all 5 of these, but I'd like to talk about each of these topics when it comes to empowering partnerships for student success. And this is partnerships between instructors and students. So the first thing we're going to talk a little bit about is building a positive community culture in your classroom. Then we'll navigate this idea of power balance, talk about cultivating and helping students become motivated learners, ways to help students become accountable for their learning, which those two are very connected, and then the emphasis on outcomes mastery as like we're being partners together because there are outcomes that you need to master, and we're going to work together so that you can master those. So just to kind of talk about how the presentation is going to work. So each new topic is going to have a reflection question and an impact question. And so I'll invite you to reflect for like 30 minutes on the first question. 30 minutes, 30 seconds. And then we'll discuss the impact question, right? So this is our first example for community culture. So I would say, what do you do in the classroom to develop a positive classroom community culture? Think about that. What do you do? When do you do it? What are you going to try now that we're all building our syllabi? What are you going to try to build a positive community culture? That was about 30 seconds. And then the impact question, what role do you feel like developing a culture of community, wow, I can't talk. What role does developing a culture of community play in helping build relationships and inspire learning? And if you want to bring up a particular activity that you do, that you're like, I do this on purpose to build a positive community culture, and here's the impact that I've seen, wonderful. But what is it? What is the impact of that thing that you do? And how does that positive community culture help inspire learning in your classroom? What have you already seen? Love to hear it. Yeah, Nada.
We all have to know each other's names.
Yeah.
And so I am really terrible at like mixing people up, like into groups of 2, groups of 3, and like, oh, you got groups, but which is like makes it funny because I always mess it up.
Yes.
But at least they've sat next to somebody different and they learned the other person's name and then they all laugh at my antics.
Right. Don't you know? I'm always like, I'm an English teacher, okay? There are 22 of you here. Divide that by 5 to the closest and group yourselves. Like, help me out. But yes, so one thing to build positive community culture is they meet each other. They learn each other's names. And the impact, how do you feel like that helps inspire learning in your classroom?
It's that, well, part of it is the like the shared experience of just like, that totally didn't work, Nolan. And like,
Yeah.
So that adds maybe just some humor in a shared humorous experience.
Yeah.
And just makes it the feel.
Yes. It's like a High School Musical vibe. Like, we're all in it together. I'm struggling today. We're all, in the English department, we have rolly desks. And so they can stick their stuff under them. And then they can just, like, roll. And I tell them, before they move, the best way to do this is to turn backwards and scoot. But inevitably, you got some of the people that didn't listen. And it's just so funny. And yes, we're getting in groups to do another activity. And by virtue of just having some silliness together, all of a sudden, we're developing a positive community culture. And I didn't do anything extra. Get into groups, scoot your cyber desk over to the other spot. Anything else people were thinking about? What do you do intentionally? Yeah, Taylor.
I have one like more serious and then one more that's like sillier. But so for the serious one, I try to say all the time, like if it matters to one of us, it matters to all of us. So like just in general, helping students realize that just because things don't like apply to them directly, it's still like a matter of something that matters to us. And that often, like even if we think that we can't like relate to something or it's not our problem, a lot of times we do have a role in the things that are like mattering to people around us. So I teach people who are training to be teachers. So like it's either like a teacher thing or it's a student thing or it's a student in my class thing. But a lot of times like the things that don't immediately seem like they matter to us, we still have like a role and a responsibility in. So I try to position things from that lens. But then a silly thing is even like when they are scooting around into those desks.
We teach in the same classrooms.
We do. So, and they love to roll around in those desks. But I used to do this when I taught high school too, and these students are training to be high school English teachers. And so I'll tell them that like when I say get into groups, there's no like group shopping where you like see someone who maybe wants to work with you and then you're like, nope. And you like, so if there's someone who's like an odd person out, then like the groups actually have to like fight over that person who like didn't have a group. They're like, no, I want them to be in my group. And I used to have high schoolers do that too, and it's silly, but it gets them into groups a lot faster. Whether they just don't want to have to do that, that solves the problem too. I'm cool with that. But just like making sure that the social things are working how they're supposed to, and that people feel wanted when I put them on the spot to scoot around together.
Absolutely. And if the focus is community, then it seems like both what Taylor and Nelda both said, build that community. Sometimes I feel like, well, and what you both said are what I'm trying to emphasize, which are these little micro interventions, right? It's something simple. We were going to get into groups anyway. So while we get into groups, if you see someone that doesn't have someone, beg them to join yours. And you know what? Everyone's going to beg them to join your group. We're going to get into groups anyway. So you may as well learn each other's names. You may as well ask, right? And it's not extra. A lot of times when I talked about this stuff before, it was, well, that sounds like a lot of extra work. But what I want you to think about is, how can I just do what I'm already doing to build a more positive community culture? So I was going to do 2-minute modifications, but this is kind of a way that I try to implement micro interventions as I'm learning things. So I would think of, okay, I would identify, let me read my notes because I wrote it down and it sounds so great when I read it out. So in this space, and you can think about these things throughout, but you can consider a modification in your own classroom to build community culture as an example. So if it's, what am I already doing that where the students have to talk to each other anyway? One that I've heard as an example is, well, the first week I call out attendance. I teach, my classes are capped at 23 because it's writing. So I call it out. So I can be like, what is your name? Tell me about you. And one of my colleagues says, well, I call out with a question, and then they respond answering the question. So one question was, who would you like to have lunch with, living or dead? And then they'd call the roll, Cree. And I was like, oh, this is who I'd like to have lunch with. You're calling it anyway. You're saying good morning, hello anyway. What could you add that's micro? So as you identify it, then you can brainstorm some ideas. But then the modification is small. It's not rebuilding an entire course. Because sometimes that's how I feel. And I don't want you to feel that way with this stuff that we talk about today. So we were talking a little bit about community culture. I want to recommend a book. And I know everyone, you're going to get like 30 book recommendations today. This book. Okay, I use things from this book in my teaching. I teach summer citizens, so they're the 80 to 90-year-olds that come here over the summer. I teach them. I use principles in this book. It has a whole section on education, which I'll show you the slide. But this is Jeffrey Cohen. He does work with Claude Steele. If any of you have read The Whistling Vivaldi, that's Claude Steele's work as sociologists. And he talks about this idea of the belonging effect. And I like to talk about this in terms of community culture. If we're going to empower partnerships, the students are partners in learning. We as their instructors are partners with them as well, so that they themselves can be successful. Because theoretically, I'm in front of the class designing it. I've had my success, apparently, right? So I'm trying to help them accomplish their goals. It's not, teaching is never about me, ever. It's always about what I can do for the people that I'm teaching. So he talks about this importance of belonging, and he calls it the belonging effect. And in this book, he says the two most powerful predictive factors for every form of adolescent risk behavior and distress were how strong a sense of belonging they had at school and how strong a sense of belonging they had at home. And I say adolescents because I teach the freshmen, so I get 17 to 21, 22-year-olds, and in my mind it's like we're emerging adults, like we're figuring this out. Then he said this belonging effect surpassed the effects of academic performance, self-esteem, religiosity, being held back a grade, parental absence, and household access to guns. Many of these risk factors capture our attention because they are visible, but the importance of connection, being harder to see, too often eludes our attention. If students feel like they belong at school, which we are a school, and they belong at home, which they're trying to promote this Aggie family thing, and that's such a convoluted term, but hopefully they feel like Utah State is their home. I don't know. I'm a connection structure, yes. Utah State is your home. Those predictors will help them be more successful than any other risk factor they found. The other thing to think about when it comes to creating a community culture, a positive classroom community culture where students feel like they belong, the research shows that when our sense of belonging is threatened, even momentarily, we're more likely to feel worse about ourselves, perform below our potential, behave impulsively, see others as hostile, and lash out defensively when provoked. When I'm reading this in the context of our political climate, however you feel about our political climate, this is true for anyone in any space. So if they come into your classroom and you ask a question, I ask students to, if they feel comfortable, I say my name is Cree Taylor, my pronouns are she, her. Even that, I'm attempting to be inclusive, but there's a person in that room who will feel threatened because of how that term, that statement has been politicized. And now they will potentially perform below their potential, be more hostile, even though I was trying to include everyone. So what do I do to account for that in the culture? I say, here's why I ask. And I allow people to share with me what their pronouns are. I just want to call you and refer to you how you would like to be referred to. So let me know. Pronoun, nickname, if it's different in Canvas, let me know. But that explanation is me hoping that by trying to include one group, I'm not ostracizing another based off of something as simple as like, just tell me what you want me to call you and I'll call you whatever it is. Let me know, okay? That was inspiring to me, right? If I can just help the students feel like in our classroom they're valued, that our classroom culture is positive, then maybe I can avoid some of these things that I'm kind of, frankly, kind of afraid of now with some of the legislation that we've had, right? So this is a chapter in the book. I'm not going to read this slide or spend that much time on it, but the chapter in the book, it is chapter 9. And the chapter is called Belonging in School. And he goes in depth about all 7 of these things of ways that you can create belonging in your classroom to craft a positive community culture, which in my view leads then to this partnership, which allows students to be more successful in your space, right? The one I will say a lot, talk about and hopefully encourage you to think about is what he calls situation crafting, which means you're doing it on purpose. You are structuring the classroom environment so students can connect. But if we're talking about micro-intervention, we're not going to now, well, I'm not a writing teacher, I'm teaching aviation technology, and they do write in the class, but I'm not going to have them sit down in the lab, and we're not going to talk about our feelings. I'm not going to have them write about it. Don't do that. It doesn't make any sense. But in a micro-interventional way, with something you're already doing, how can you craft that same situation to incorporate student belonging? What can you do? It's the same thing. We're just moving desks around. But by virtue of having them move in this way instead of that way, we're creating a culture of belonging in our classroom. So I don't know how you guys are getting these slides, but those are kind of all the things that he talks about in there to create belonging at school and to enhance community culture. One way that I try to enhance community culture in the writing classroom is by students entering a feedback loop. And this feedback loop is, hey, in this room, we talk to each other. Yes, you're writing about things. Yes, you have your opinions on things. But we're here. We're going to talk to each other. It will be okay. Students, when they turn in student writing to anyone, whether it's me or to their peers, they feel like they're writing about their soul. And they're handing over their whole identity to me. And if I assess it and give feedback, which I do, because that's what good teachers do, assess and give feedback, I'm tearing apart their soul. And if I do it in red pen, like I'm stabbing them and now their soul is bleeding. And then I give it back to them. So to try to get out of that community culture mode in writing, we do peer review anyway. So how do I make it so that it's not that? We're not bearing or handing over our souls. What we're doing is communicating our writing to different audiences and seeing how they receive it. And then we work that situation. Okay, how can we make peer review a positive experience? What do you all think? Okay, now we're going to do it, right? They get feedback from me. When they submit papers to me, I say, hey, I'm just another reader. I'm really excited to give you some feedback on your paper. And I don't use red. I use the highlighters in Canvas, and it's not red, and I try to be conversational. But again, that community culture. I'm going to give them feedback anyway. How can I help that feedback make them feel like we're partners in the learning process? I meet with them one-on-one, and then I introduce them to the Writing Center. But that's something that I do. That's part of what I do anyway as a writing teacher that allows me to build community culture. I didn't have to add anything new. I just modified what I was already doing slightly. So that's our community culture piece. This is where I invite you, and we won't do 2 minutes, but I do invite you to think about it. And I'll pause to breathe. What is it in your classroom? What is a practice that you already do, or that you've just wanted to try it out? Identify it. How do you build a positive community culture in the classroom? Or what do you want to build? The second one is, what could you do? On the first day, I could stand by the door like high school teachers do, and I could say, hey, welcome. Happy you're here. Versus frantically trying to log in. Just get there just a little bit earlier, you know? And it's easier said than done. Get there a little bit earlier, and then they're walking in, you're like, hey, tell me your name. So happy that you're here. You were already going to be there anyway. It's not anything new. It's not that much extra, right? Leave 2 minutes earlier just to get there. And then make that plan to modify. If you're like, you know what, I can do this intervention, but not this fall, not in a week, but I'm going to do it in the spring. So in the spring, when I'm looking over something, or not yet, but I'm going to go on my calendar and I'm going to modify that piece. Think that through, creating that positive community culture. And she's breathing. Next. Okay, so now we're talking about power balance. And I am not quite sure how I feel about talking about balance of power. Our keynote speaker today was like, switching to ungrading is automatically switching and shifting and thinking about power in the classroom differently. And I was like, well, I don't really want to hand over that much power to them because I've earned this power. And it's a fallacy to say that you're actually giving them any power. Really? You're the instructor of record. You, in the end, are marking the letter grade, whatever that letter grade may be, even if the grade comes in conversation with the student, which is how I do it, in a way. Comes in conversation with the student, in the end, I push the button. I push enter. If the student has an issue with my grade, I walk into that room at an advantage because the university is supporting me over them first. Even if I say, students, you pick any writing topic you want, I'm still telling them what to do. In my head. You don't have to agree with any of that. But when I think oh, this is me giving power back to the students, I'm like, maybe it's me sharing in that power, But in the end, I'm the instructor of record. I really have all of it. I really do. And I can decide how we navigate that power. So reflect for a minute, thinking about balance of power and how you, in your embodiment, I really think that's important too, in your identity as a teacher, what does power balance look like in your classroom? What does that mean? If you have classes of 5, classes of 30, classes of 180, think about that. Do you feel powerful? Do your students, I use the word empowering in the title. Do you try to empower them? What do they actually have power over? In reference to you? They do have power over what they want to do in the classroom. They don't have power over the consequence. They have some, whether or not they want to show up. But in the end, like, I get to determine the consequences of what happens, whether or not they show up. So then I am curious, because I just pontificated about how I feel about power. How do you navigate in your own spaces? And I would love to hear what those spaces are, because I think context is important. How do you navigate instructor authority and student autonomy in your own classroom spaces? Talk to each other first, don't talk to me. Talk to people next to you. Ready, set, go. Now, talk now. Look at that. Do it. I have the power. Do it. Is there a drinking fountain close out here? Or is it far away? All right. I'll just suffer. No, you're good. But maybe there's also an understanding that once students are aware that they actually have more power than they do, right? Maybe it's an awareness of power. I'm like, dude, and I tell my students this. I'm like, at the university level, say again. That's fine. At the end, if the students, I'm like, hey, do you know that your fees that you have to pay, your university fees, students decide that. People have to appeal to the fee board, which your president chairs. Really? I'm like, yeah. So sometimes maybe they don't realize that they have as much as they do, but it sounds like you've had an experience where they learned. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Final thoughts? Final thoughts, final thoughts? All right. So when I do think about power balance and what that looks like for me in my classroom, I identified it to you. I think also, again, your embodiment matters, what your credentials matter, what you're teaching matters. All of those things affect power balance in the classroom. So please know that I'm not ignorant of those things. I remember asking people in the department a couple of years ago, I was like, a student yelled at me in class. What am I supposed to do? And everyone's like, well, when you get older, they'll stop yelling at you. And I'm like, so I just have to wait till I get old. Like, I'm going to suffer, and then I'm going to get old, and they'll be nice to me. And then someone goes, Cree, I get it. It's not, it's all of these intersecting identities. And they gave me much better advice. Then the person was like, you'll just age out of being disrespected. Don't you worry. It's like, okay, thanks. So in my view, when I think of power, and again, we're trying to let students know that their learning really is a partnership. I can't remember if it was in my last session or in the keynote where I think it was in my last session, where sometimes students will say, well, that instructor doesn't know how to teach, and so I didn't learn anything. So that's putting all the responsibility on me. And then for me, I go, well, these students are, I would never say this, not me. I've heard it said. These students are lazy and they don't know how to learn. So they didn't get the content. I delivered them a beautifully wrapped package, and they didn't even know how to undo the bow. These students today, right? In my view, it's a shared responsibility, okay? And I see it as student choice, a balance between student choice and teacher authority. So student choice, how many options do we give to students before it becomes a bit too much? This is, again, discipline and context specific. I had a colleague that was like, oh, in my grad classes, I say special topics in, and then I'm not going to tell you the topic area because I don't want to out anybody. Special topics in, and then I show up and I say, okay, I have the first 2 weeks filled out, but you all need to fill out the rest of the syllabus. What do you want to learn about? And I was like, well, you give them topics, right? And he's like, no, they tell me, and then they find the readings, and then we fill it out. And I was like, too much student choice for me. Like, there's no way that I could do that in anything, in who I am as a teacher, my pedagogical practices, my embodiment, my class sizes. I teach the freshmen. So I'm like, what do you want to learn? They're like, I don't know, I just got here. You're supposed to be telling me, aren't they paying you? Not very much, but they are. So this idea of student choice, for me, I always like, okay, I want to give them options, but how many options are too many options, right? And then teacher authority. Where does student choice end? And authority, I use that word on purpose, and I know people don't like it, but where does student choice end and teacher authority begin? And I would argue that the way you navigate it is in your course design, right? I will allow students to choose here, but then when it comes to what chapters we're reading, they're reading these chapters. This is what informs this. And we make those decisions and navigate those. Again, we're going to situation craft, so we're going to do it intentionally to try to navigate that. But I'm curious, what do you all think about this? This is a fun topic. Where do you see student choice and teacher authority maybe working in harmony or fighting each other a little bit? I am going to stop there. What have you guys noticed in your own experiences with student choice? And if you don't like the word authority, pick whatever word you want.
Someone helped me, this isn't something I read, to come up with percentages for myself, and I thought this was really helpful. And this is for writing or like responding to an assignment. So you can have the students choose the topic, the genre, like the way that they respond to you, both or neither. And there's like moments for all of those. And so you just have to like play with your percentages and see what works. And that was really helpful.
Yes.
To find balance between those.
And you're doing that in one assignment, right? Like we're doing this assignment, and now I have to navigate student choice in the context of one assignment. So it can look that way, right? Assignment to assignment. It could look on a grander scale, but for me, that's how I think about it too, and because we're in the same discipline, that probably makes sense, is that assignment to assignment. The first assignment, your choice is to write as informally as possible, but you're writing about this topic. And that's how the second one, now you get to choose from two things. You're going to write either about this or about this, and your writing's going to be more formal. Last one, you can write about any topic you would like, but you're writing this type of paper, you're doing this type of research, right? And that's kind of what that looks like over the semester for me. But any other thoughts about this? Shared responsibility. Yeah. Tell us what you teach.
Sorry.
What do you teach?
Social work.
Lovely. Go ahead.
So one of the things that I do is I do a thing called burning questions. We're reading at the beginning of the week. And so they read, and then they have to submit 2 questions that they have about the reading. And then I go through and I pick a couple of them, and then they have a group discussion, and then we bring it back to the class. And that's what I focus, what I teach that week of that chapter. I focus on the burning questions.
So the student choice there is they're choosing what questions they want to talk about, but the teacher authority point was we're reading this.
Yes, this is what we're reading, and then I tailor it to them, but I also put in the information that I need to put in.
Absolutely.
So.
Great. Yeah. Tell us what, I see some, what do you teach?
Well, forest health.
Okay. I'm sorry. What are the bugs on your shirt?
Yeah.
What are they?
There's periodic cicadas.
Cicadas?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I teach forest health, which is complicated because it's people generally have like one interest, one subject area interest, and it's a pretty broad class. And so I don't give them any, like I have set units in the class, but give them the ability to choose whatever system they want to explain. So like,
Okay.
do you want to explain this concept with an insect, with fire, with a disease, and then giving them the option to do 3 assignments that are in different categories
Yeah.
on that topic.
Yeah. And maybe it's just my personality, but I'm all for student choice, but for me, I'm like, for me personally, there has to be some structure behind that choice, because I also need to think about care of self, right? Some instructors can do it. They can do a workshop setting, or they can do a choose your own adventure setting, and they can navigate that in their discipline with as much care as possible. That is not me. I can't, right? So I'm trying to find these little ways that we've kind of already addressed and discussed, where the students can still feel like they have a choice in what it is that they're doing. And I can also say, like, we're managed, I've got little kids. This is managed chaos. Like, you thought this was your idea, but we're doing some inception here. And you felt like you chose it, and I'm glad, and I hope that that really helps you feel like I got to study insects, because that's really what I care about. I don't want to study fire. I want to talk about the insects specifically. Then they're able to do that within these skills that you're trying to teach them. Sometimes with ungrading conversations, it can feel like that. If I'm giving them, the keynote said 0-point assignments, for me, I'm like, I'm never doing that ever. Thank you so much, but that's not something I can do. But for other people, they're like, that's perfect. But for me, I go, well, that's too much choice. How am I supposed to assess learning outcomes in that? But for others, it works. So I think as you're navigating power balance, I think of it in terms of shared responsibility. This is from the Carnegie Mellon University Emberley Center for Teaching Excellence and Educational Innovation. And they say, give student choice where appropriate. And these are some of the things that they talk about on their website. So you can allow students space to choose a topic, choose a format for their final project. So they still need to demonstrate these learning outcomes, but they can pick the format, right? Be sure assessments align with your learning goals, but you can give students different options to express their knowledge. Again, I like to think of those learning goals and the course outcomes as the anchor for me. Sure, you want to do an interpretive dance. I still need to see how you're demonstrating these course outcomes, because that's what I have to assess. And if you're like, well, if you don't understand dance, which I do not, and you don't know that this means this, then I say you have to write about it. You have to send me footnotes on your dance, because I don't know enough to interpret it to know that you're meeting assessment goals. You need to tell me, right? That's me personally. Allow students to choose one or several topics of discussion, which we heard in the room, or learning in your class when possible. You could reserve some time at the end of the semester and poll your students about what they would like to learn. I've tried that one. So if we're thinking about microintervention, that professor that was like, oh yeah, they fill the syllabus. We spend the first week of class filling out the syllabus. It's like, good luck. But what I did was in one of the courses, I was like, okay, I'm going to leave 2 weeks at the end. I'll leave 2 weeks at the end for them to say what it is about the topic that we've learned that they really want to talk about. This is in a course I teach about race and ethnicity. So I was like, okay, we've learned all this stuff. We've got 2 weeks. What didn't we cover? What do you want to talk about? During the pandemic years, it was, let's talk a little bit more about anti-Asian hate. Pre to pandemic, we talked a lot about Islamophobia. That was a thing. During the Olympics, they all wanted to talk about like sports and race and the intersections. But then for me, I was comfortable with that. Okay, we've gotten the rest of it, 2 weeks. What do you all want? We fill it out, and we talk about those things together. So there's your power balance. That's what we talked about. Thinking yourself, how do you do it? How do you share in power? But for me, if we have a shared responsibility for learning, the students need to come trying to learn from me, and I need to come trying to teach them well. How do I navigate that? And for me, that's a balance of student choice and your authority in the classroom. So you can think about it. What does that look like? Is there an assignment, like one assignment, that I have this semester or in the spring that I could go at, instead of just giving them the one reading, I could give them 2. The students could pick which one they want to read, and then we can come back and talk about it. Small intervention, nothing huge, which kind of helps them feel empowered, gives them some choice, and I would argue it helps them feel a little bit more invested because they picked it. And it gives me an excuse to go, now you better read this because you said you wanted to. You said you wanted to, so read it and come ready to go. Okay, this one's a little bit more about cultivating motivated learners. And if we're thinking about learning as a partnership, here's our reflection question. And I think about learning motivation in terms of how I assess. And this is our Rethinking the Grade conference. And so for me, how can I use my assessment practices to get my students to be motivated to learn versus motivated to getting a good grade, which we had a keynote on, and you probably have heard a presentation that talked about it already. So think about your own assessment practices. Again, this is context specific. In the writing class, they don't have to pass a licensing exam at the end of English 1010. They don't have to do that. So I can say, well, I'm not going to give you a quiz, and I'm not going to give you any exams, because for me, they don't need it. But for some of you, you're like, no, this course, the purpose of this course is to help prepare them for their practical exam. That's the purpose. So think about the assessment in learning. Do you assess learning in a way that provides hope to them and motivates them to continue to master course outcomes? To the extent that you can, especially those of us that do certifications, right? If you're like, well, sure, I could let them retake early exams. I could let them retake some until they have mastered and are demonstrating that they know the exam. But by the time we get to midterm, they need to be able to sit for the one test, because when they sit for that certification, if they don't pass it, they have to wait 2 years to recertify. Some of you, that's your context. Some of you, it's they can actually sit multiple times for this certification exam. They can sit 3 times. So how can I apply that principle to motivating learners in my course? Because I know they can sit 3 times in 6 months. This course is how can I show them that skill? So thinking about that, what do I do? How do I assess in a way that provides hope to students and motivates them to keep trying? Giving them back a paper that like literally looks like it's covered in blood using a red pen just is not very motivating. I've learned in my discipline. They're just like, see, I knew it. I knew I sucked at writing. I knew it. Look what you did to my paper. And she probably hates me. It's like, okay, calm down. I don't even know you. And then think about impact. What impact do your current assessment practices have on student learning, and should things change? This is your specific context. And is it something small? Again, the semester's coming fast. So you're going, oh, yeah, there's this one exam, and I keep telling myself I'm going to change it, and I just don't. I'm going to change it for spring. I'm going to do it. Or there are these assignments, and I score them out of 3 points, and they turn them in every week, but those assignments are becoming a hindrance to students. It's not actually helping them learn, and they're just getting frustrated because now they have a B, when if they would have done something differently, they would have had an A. And are the assignments really worth it? Are they assessing what I want? I had to think about that too. Why am I giving them this? Is it actually telling me anything, or am I giving them this because the curriculum example that I got when I got here did that, and so I've just been doing it? This one comes from this book called Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, and this is by Zaretta Hammond, and she pulls stuff from all over the place. I skipped the parts, and this is going to make some of you shudder, I skipped the parts where she talked about the brain and like brain chemistry. Like, I'm okay. I believe you. Some of you are going to be like, no, this is important. For me, I was like, just give me the practical stuff. But she talks about assessment and feedback and encourages people to adopt this role of a warm demander. And her context is K through 12, but I still think this is helpful. So she says, a warm demander pedagogy allows teachers to push students to take more academic risks and gain confidence. The ultimate goal as a warm demander is to help students take over the reins of their learning. So a warm demander is that, like, I know that this is our goal, and I know you had a difficult time. I'm going to kindly insist that you meet the outcome. Like, we're going to do it. And not only that, but I'm going to offer emotional support and scaffolding to help you. But I'm not going to lower a standard. I know you had a really rough semester, and I'm really sorry about that. I wish that things in your life, in your personal life, had gone better for you. I still cannot give you what you want because you have not demonstrated that you passed the course outcomes. But there's time. You won't get an A, but you could pass. Here's what we got to do, right? That's that warm demander. It helps view students, it says, viewed by students as caring because of personal regard, and she says tough love, but it encourages productive struggle. I won't tell that anecdote. She talks a little bit more about giving wide feedback, but she takes this from other places. So Cohn, who we just saw, and Claude Steele, they did some work on cross-race mentoring back in 2002, and they gave us this term, wise feedback, when it comes to motivating learners. And they said the teacher has to convey faith in the potential of the student while being honest with the student about the gap between their current performance and the standard they're trying to reach. But you don't want to do it in a way that makes them go, I'll never reach the standard. Right? If we're a warm demander and if we're giving wide feedback, it's actually giving students a goal to reach towards so that they can accomplish the standard. So she talks about provide instructive, corrective feedback that is specific and timely, hold explicitly high standards so they know what the standard is. I do this by using rubrics. And course outcomes, provide personal assurance that the student is capable and they can do it. I see that as a micro intervention as well, right? Okay, you gave me back my paper. I see that I didn't get the score that I wanted, and I've never been really good at writing. I'm like, well, here are some of the things that I think were amazing about this. And if you had just done what you did in this paragraph, in this one later in the essay, you nailed it. What happened? It sounds like right here you maybe got tired of writing the paper. And they're like, yeah. I go, okay, well, you can do it. I saw it in the paper. And you got a week. Here, let's talk through it. Come on, you can do this. Put the same amount of energy into your last couple paragraphs as you put into the first couple, and you've got it. But make sure it's very specific, and then deliver it in an explicit way, like this doesn't meet the standard, but affirm them. You can meet the standard. And then you're doing that part. There's that partnership of, I've set the standard, I've been trying to help you, you see that you're struggling, but it's up to you, with my help, to join me to help you accomplish these goals. This isn't something that I'm leaving you to do on your own. So that's kind of that feedback loop. Last one, this one's about student accountability. How do I motivate students to take accountability for their own learning? She talks about student accountability in her text, Dr. Hammond. The first step in helping students take greater ownership rests in giving them feedback and space for reflection. To get dependent learners to act on feedback or to be strategic, they have to first believe in themselves as learners. Our job is to get students to recognize that putting forth the effort is worth the work. I'm not sure what that looks like in each of your contexts. I tried so hard, and I'm still not getting this. In your context, how do you help them understand that there's power and importance in the trying? Students with positive academic mindsets are more willing to engage, work harder, and persevere during challenging assignments that stretch them. Our focus has to be on shifting mindsets rather than on trying to force engagement or cajole students' motivation. None of you do this, but you're like, you know what? Here, if you just submit this last assignment, I'll give you a piece of candy. The candy will motivate you. I do that for idea assessments. Give them, hey, take this. Hey, just so you know, it's the last day. Do you guys want a donut? Don't forget to do idea evaluations. But students have to become self-motivated, and that's one of the hallmarks of an independent learner. So when we're thinking about student accountability, it's not necessarily saying, I did the best. I'm the best teacher. I'm a master teacher. ETE told me so. If you're not learning, it's your fault. It's I am doing and being intentional. I'm situation crafting so that I'm presenting you with a good product. I brought in a peer evaluator because I acknowledged that there was a gap in my teaching and I wasn't sure what I was doing wrong. And now here I am. Now you also have to take accountability for this. What does that look like? Well, I just need a C. Great. I'm going to give you wise feedback. I'm going to be a warm demander, and we're going to get you that C so you can move forward and move on in your class. So I thought I had to show I do ungrading. This is my ungrading learning assessment contract that I do in writing. Students can revise. The writing process assignments are building their papers. But this is me giving students choice, and it really does motivate them. Sometimes they'll go, well, I missed an assignment, and now I'm not sure what to do. Writing process. What do I do? How do I make it up? And I'm like, just don't do it. Wait, I don't have to do it? I'm like, let's pull out our learning assessment contract. Are you busy? Well, I'm going to miss the workshop on Friday. Well, you haven't missed any. It's fine. Make the decision to miss it. It will impact your learning. It's not something we shouldn't do, but you can choose. And if you make a mistake, you can revise.